Chapter 14, The Way Out. The next day was song rehearsal day. Everyone was let off from work at 12 o'clock to practice for the singing. It was a slow morning for messages. Lina had a lot of time to sit at her station in Garden Square and think. She put her elbows on her knees, rested her chin in her hands, and stared down at the pavement in front of the bench, which was worn smooth by the many feet that had passed here. She thought of the mayor, going down in his room full of plunder, gorging on peaches and asparagus, and wrapping his huge body in elegant new clothes. She thought of his great stack of light bulbs and shook her head in bewilderment. What was he thinking? If he still had light bulbs when everyone else in Ember had run out, would he enjoy sitting in his lit room while the rest of the city drowned in darkness? And when the power finally ran out for good, all his light bulbs would be useless. Possessions couldn't save him. How could he have forgotten that? He must be thinking the same way Looper was. Everything was hopeless anyway, so he might as well live it up while he could. She leaned back against the bench, stretched her legs out, and took a long breath. Very soon, the guards would storm into the secret room and seize the mayor as he sat stuffing himself on stolen goods. Maybe they already had. Maybe today the stunning news would come. Mayor arrested, stealing from citizens. Maybe they'd announce it at the singing so everyone could hear it. No one came with any messages to be delivered, so after a while, Lina left her station and found a step to sit on. She pulled her hair back and braided it to keep it from sliding around. Then she took from her pocket the copy of the instructions she'd made just after she sent her note to the mayor. She unfolded it and began to study it. This is what she was doing when, a little before 12 o'clock, she looked up to see Doon running toward her. He must have come straight from the pipeworks. He spoke in an excited rush. "I've been looking all over for you," he said. "I found it." "I found what?" "The E. At least, it looks like an E. It must be an E, though you wouldn't know it if you weren't looking for it." "You mean the rock marked with an E in the pipeworks?" Yes, I found it." He stood breathing hard, his eyes blazing. "I've seen it before, but I didn't think of it as an E then, just a squiggle that looked like writing. There are all these rocks that look like they're covered with writing." "Which rocks? Where is it?" Lina was on her feet now, bouncing with excitement. "Down at the west end of the river, near where it goes into the great hole in the pipeworks wall." He paused, trying to catch his breath. "And listen, we could go there right now." "Right now?" "Yes, because of rehearsals. Everyone's going home, so the pipeworks will be closed and empty. But if it's closed, how will we get in?" Grinning, Doon produced a large key from his pocket. "I ducked into the office on my way out and borrowed the spare key," he said. "Lister, he's the pipeworks director, was in the bathroom practicing his singing. He won't miss the key today. And tomorrow everyone will be off work." He did an impatient shuffle. "So come on," he said. The town clock struck the first of its 12 noontime booms. Lina stuffed her copy of the instructions back in her pocket. "Let's go." The pipeworks was silent and empty. Lina and Doon went up the hallways, past the rows of boots and slickers. They didn't take any of these for themselves. This was not a pipeworks tunnel they were about to enter, they were sure. It wouldn't be dripping with water. They went down the long stairway and out the main tunnel, where the river thundered alongside the path, its dark surface strewn with flecks of light. Doon led the way along the river's edge. As they neared the west end, Lina saw the rocky outcroppings Doona had described to her. They were strange, bulging shapes creased with lines. Not far beyond, Lina could see the place where the river disappeared into a great hole in the pipeworks wall. Doon knelt down beside a clump of stones. He ran a finger over their convoluted surface. "Look here," he said. Lina stooped down and peered at the deeply carved lines. It was hard to see the E at first, because it was surrounded by such a tangle of other lines. But once she saw it, an E drawn with curving lines, a script E, she was sure it had been carved on purpose. "So from here, we should look down at the river," said Doon. "That's what the instruction said. Down riverbank to ledge." He lay on his stomach next to the rock and inched forward until his head hung over the path at the edge. Lina looked at him anxiously. His elbows stuck up on either side of him, and his head, bent down, was nearly invisible. He stayed that way for long seconds. Then he shouted, "Yes, I see something!" and scrambled to his feet again. "You do it," he said. "Look at the riverbank right below us." Lina did as he said. She lay down and pulled herself forward until her head was over the edge. 8 feet or so below her, she saw the black water churning by. She tucked her chin in and looked at the riverbank. It was a sheer rock wall, and at first that was all she saw. She kept looking, and before long she could make out short iron bars bolted into the bank, one below the next, almost directly below her. They were like the rungs of a ladder. The bars provided a way to climb down the riverbank. Not a very appealing way. The bars looked slippery, and the water below was so terribly fast. Because of the dimness and the flying spray, she could not actually see if there was a ledge at the bottom or not. But the E was clearly an E, and the bars were clearly a ladder. This must be the right place. "Who'll go first?" said Doon. "You can," Lina said, getting to her feet and stepping away. "All right." Doon turned so his back was to the river, and he eased himself carefully over the rocks, feeling for the first rung with his foot. Lina watched as he sank out of sight. After a few moments, his voice called up from below. "I'm down! Now you come!" Lina inched backward, just as Doon had, letting one foot dangle over the edge, lower and lower until it touched the first rung of the ladder. She shifted her weight to that foot, clinging with cold fingers to a ridge in the rock, and lowered herself until she was standing on the rung with both feet. Her heart was beating so hard she was afraid it would shake her fingers loose from their grip. Now she had to move downward. She felt for the next rung, and when she found it, let herself down. It would have been easy if it weren't for the river waiting to swallow her. "You're almost there," called Doon. His voice came from right below her. "There's a ledge. One more rung and you'll feel it." She did feel it, solid beneath her foot. For a second she stood there, still clutching the ladder. The surging water was only inches below her now. "Don't think about it," she told herself. She moved sideways to step next to Doon, and in front of them was a rectangular space carved out of the river wall, rather like the entry hall of a building. It was 8 feet wide and 8 feet high, and you wouldn't have been invisible from anywhere else in the pipeworks. You had to climb down the riverbanks to see it. They stepped into this entry hall. Enough light came to see from the tunnel behind them. Lina stopped. "There's a door," she said. "What?" said Doon. The water roared so loudly they had to shout to be heard. "The door!" Lina yelled happily. "Yes!" Doon yelled back. "I see it!" At the end of the passage was a wide, solid-looking door. It was dull gray. Lina put her hands against it. It was metal and it felt cold. The door had a metal handle, and just below the handle was a keyhole. Lina reached into her pocket of her pants for the copy of the instructions. She unfolded it, and Doon looked over her shoulder. Together, they squinted at the paper in the dim light. "This is the part, right here," she said, pointing. 3. Add down riverbank to edge up 8 low 4. Axe to the water. Find door of cur. K. Behind small steel pan the right. Rem. E. Open dough. Lina ran her finger along number 3. This must say something down to ledge approximately 8 feet below. That's what we've just done. Then 4 is something about backs to the water, find door, something, and then hind must be key behind. And then there's the steel pan. Do you see a small steel pan? Doon was still studying the paper. "It says right. We should look to the right of the door." And quite easily they found it. It wasn't a pan at all, but a small square of steel embedded in the wall. "A steel panel," said Lina. She ran her fingers across it and felt a dent at one side. When she pressed there, the panel sprang open easily and silently, as if it were glad to be found. Inside, a silver key was hanging on a hook. Lina reached for it and then drew her hand back. "Shall I do it?" she said, "or shall you?" "You do it," said Doon. So she took the key from its hook and put it in the keyhole. She turned it and felt a clip. She grasped the door handle and pushed, but nothing happened. "It won't budge," she said. "Maybe it opens outward," said Doon. She pulled. The door still wouldn't move. "It has to open," she said. "We unlocked it." She pulled and pushed and hauled on the handle, and the door moved, not inward or outward, but sideways. "Oh, this is how it goes," cried Lina. She pulled the handle to the left, and with a deep rasping sound, the door slid away into a slot in the wall. Behind it was a space of utter darkness. They stared. Lina had expected to see something when the door opened. She had thought there would be light behind it, and a path or a road. "Shall we go in?" said Lina. Doon nodded. Lina stepped across the threshold. The air had a dank, stuffy smell. She turned to the right and put her right hand against the wall. It was smooth and flat. The floor was smooth, too. There might be a light switch, she said. She patted the wall just beside the door and from the floor to as high as she could reach, but she found nothing. Doon turned left and felt to the other side. Nothing, he said. Very slowly, keeping a hand to the wall and tapping the floor cautiously, they made their way in opposite directions. Each of them came to a corner and turned again. Now they were going deeper into the dark. Suddenly, Lina gave a yelp of surprise. "Something's here on the floor," she said. Her foot had banged against a hard object. She knelt down and touched it cautiously with her hands. It was a metal cube about a foot square. "It's a box, I think." "Two boxes," she added. Doon took a step toward her in the darkness, and his knees banged into a hard edge. "Ah, there's something else here too," he said. "Not a box." He ran his hands along it. "It's big and it has a curved edge." "The boxes are small enough to lift. Let's take them out where it's lighter and see what they are." Doon made his way to Lina and picked up one of the boxes. They walked back through the door and set them on the river's edge. They were made of dark green metal and had gray metal handles on top, a kind of latch on the side that opened easily. Lina and Doon raised the hinged lids and looked inside them. What they saw puzzled and disappointed them. Lina's box was full of smooth white rods, each about 10 inches long. At the end of one, a little bit of string poked out. In Doon's box were dozens of small packets wrapped in a slippery material. He opened one and found a lot of short wooden sticks, each with a blue bob on the end. Both boxes had a label on the lid of the candle. On the lid. The label on Lina's box said candles. The label on Doon said matches, and under it was a white, inch-wide strip of some rough, pebbly material. "What does candles mean?" Lina said, puzzled. She took out one of the white rods. It felt slick, almost greasy. "What does matches mean?" said Doon. "Match what?" He took out one of the small sticks from its packet. The blue stuff on the end was not wood. Could it be something to write with, like a pencil? Maybe it writes blue. But what's the whole point of a bunch of tiny pencils? I don't understand. Doon frowned at the little blue-tipped stick. "I don't see what else it could be," he said. "I'll try writing something with it." "On what?" I could try it on the instructions." Lina handed them to him. Carefully, he rubbed the blue end of the stick on the paper. It didn't leave a mark. No mark on his arm, either. "Try this white stuff," Lina said, pointing to the white strip on the lid of the box. He scraped the blue tip across the rough surface. Instantly, the end of the stick burst into flame. Doon cried out and flung the stick away. It landed on the floor a few feet off, where it burned brightly for a moment and then sputtered out. "It makes fire," said Doon, "and light." "Let me try one," said Lina. She took a stick from the box and ran it across the rough strip. It blazed up fiercely, but she managed to hold on to it for a second. Then she felt the heat on her fingers and let go, and the flaming stick dropped over the edge into the river. "Fire sticks," said Doon. "And are they what saves Ember?" "I don't see how they could be," said Lina. "They're so small and they go out so fast." This was not turning out the way she hoped it would. She held up one of the white things. "Anyway, what are these for?" "Maybe a candle is a kind of handle," he said. "Maybe you tie the stick on with the string, and then you can hold it longer while it burns." "But it would still go out just as fast," Lina said. "Yes," said Doon. "That's all I can think of. Let's try it." With a great deal of effort, they looped the strings of a rod around one of the sticks. Lina held the rod while Doon scraped the blue tip into flame. They watched the stick flare brightly. The woods turned black, and the charred fire stick crumbled and dropped to the ground. But the light didn't go out. The string itself had caught fire. As they watched, it sputtered and smoked, and then burned steadily, filling the little room with a warm glow. "It's the movable light," said Doon in awe. All Lina's excitement flooded back. And now, she said, "we can go back into the room and see what's there." They went back down the passage to the doorway and stepped inside. Lina held the movable light at arm's length before her. In its flickering glow, she saw something made of silvery metal. They walked slowly around, examining it. It was long and low, filling up the center of the room. One end of it came to a point. The other end was flat. Across the open middle stretched 2 metal strips. 4 stout ropes were attached to the outside, one at each end and one on each side. And on the floor of the thing were 2 poles, each flattened at one end. "Look," said Lina, "there's a word on the side." They squatted at the pointed end and held the flame near the word. It said, in square black letters, "Boat." "Boat," repeated Doon. "What does that mean?" "I don't know," said Lina. "Oh, there's another word on these poles. Paddles. The only paddle I know is the one Mrs. Polster used on kids who misbehave in school." Once again, she took her copy of the instructions from her pocket. She consulted it, holding it in the light of the flame. "Look," she said, "right here. Oat must be boat." "And the next part must say, stocked with necessary equipment," said Doon. "That must be what's in the boxes. And then there's this." Lina ran her finger along the next line. 6. Usi, ops, loe, ter. Head, dow, st. Us, pa, av, x. And assist over wrap. "This word must be ropes," she said. "Then lower. And then, what, this word be downstairs? Maybe it's head downstairs? That doesn't make sense. There aren't any stairs except the ones that go up," said Doon. He frowned at the word, and then he took a short, sharp breath. "Downstream. The word must be downstream. It must say something like, use the ropes to lower the boat and head downstream." He looked up at Lina and spoke in a voice full of wonder. "The boat goes on the water. It's something to ride in." They stared at each other in the flickering light, realizing what this meant. There was no tunnel leading out of Ember. The way out was the river. To leave Ember, they must go on the river.